Why do so many men over 40 feel lost, even when their lives look stable from the outside? You may have a career, a family, a mortgage, responsibilities, people who depend on you. And yet something feels strangely absent. You wake up, handle what needs to be handled, go to work, solve problems, pay bills, answer messages, and somewhere between all those responsibilities, a thought appears that you rarely say out loud. Is this really my life now? It may look like a midlife crisis, a loss of purpose, or simply the unsettling feeling that you no longer know who you are beyond what you provide for other people. And for many men, starting over after 40 does not mean destroying the life they built. It means learning how to find themselves inside it again. There is a particular kind of confusion that can arrive in a man's 40s. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes there is no breakdown, no sudden decision, no obvious crisis. Life simply begins to feel less meaningful than it once did. The goals that kept you moving for 20 years may no longer motivate you. The roles that once gave you identity may begin to feel restrictive. And the future, which once seemed full of possibilities, can start to feel strangely predetermined. If you've been feeling this way, this conversation is about understanding what may be happening and how to begin a realistic life reset after 40 without pretending you can erase your responsibilities or become 25 again. If conversations like this help you put words to things you normally carry quietly, subscribe to A Friend to Heal With and tell us in the comments what city, state, or country you're watching from. There are men listening from very different places who may be carrying surprisingly similar questions. Because before you can reset your life, you first have to understand what exactly feels lost. Imagine a man named Daniel. He's 47. Nothing in his life appears to be collapsing. He has spent more than 20 years building a career. He has people who respect him. His calendar is full. His bills are mostly under control. He knows how to solve problems quickly because that is what people expect from him. One evening, he sits in his car outside his house after work. He has already arrived home, but he doesn't go inside. He checks his phone even though there is nothing important to check. Then he turns off the screen and sits there for another few minutes. He's not trying to avoid his family. He's not even sure what he's doing. He just knows that inside the car, for a few minutes, nobody needs anything from him. And that silence feels strangely good. This kind of moment can tell you something important. A man can become highly competent at managing his life while becoming increasingly disconnected from experiencing it. For years, you may have lived according to a sequence of responsibilities. Finish school, build a career, earn more, provide, find a partner, raise children, buy the house, stay dependable, keep going. There is nothing inherently wrong with any of these things. Many of them may matter deeply to you. But eventually another question can emerge. Who am I when I'm not completing the next obligation? That question can be unsettling because many men were never encouraged to build an emotional vocabulary for it. They learned how to respond to problems with action. If something breaks, repair it. If money is tight, work harder. If someone needs help, become useful. If you're hurting, keep functioning. That approach may have helped you survive difficult periods and build a stable life, but feeling lost is different from having a practical problem. You cannot always solve it by working more. Sometimes working more is how you avoid noticing it. You may recognize this in small changes. Things you once enjoyed seem flat. You fantasize about leaving your job even though you don't know what you would do instead. You become unusually irritated by minor problems. You scroll through the lives of old friends and quietly wonder whether they made better choices. You miss versions of yourself that you barely remember being. Or you find yourself thinking about time. Not death necessarily, just time. How much has passed? How quickly the next 10 years might pass? How many decisions now feel permanent? And this is often where a man tells himself something harsh. I'm being ungrateful. I should be happy. Other people have bigger problems, but gratitude and dissatisfaction can exist at the same time. You can appreciate what you have and still realize that something inside you needs attention. The more important question is not whether you have a good life. It is whether the person you have become still feels connected to the person living it. And to understand why that connection becomes weaker after 40, we need to look at something most men were never taught to notice: how identity gets built around usefulness. For many men, identity develops through roles: provider, husband, father, manager, business owner, problem solver, the dependable one, the person everyone calls when something goes wrong. These roles can create belonging and purpose, but there is a hidden risk. If almost all of your self-worth comes from being useful, you can eventually lose contact with parts of yourself that have nothing to prove. Consider how often men introduce themselves by what they do. What do you do for work? It's a normal question. But after decades of answering it, work can become more than employment. It becomes evidence of your value. Then something changes. Perhaps you stop advancing professionally. Maybe younger colleagues enter your field. Your children need you differently. A marriage changes. Your parents get older. Your body stops responding exactly the way it used to. A friendship quietly disappears. You reach goals that once seemed important and discover they did not create the feeling you expected. These changes can create what psychologists broadly describe as an identity transition. In simple terms, the old version of you no longer completely fits, but the next version has not been built yet. That space between identities can feel like emptiness. And because uncertainty is uncomfortable, the mind often starts searching for a simple explanation. Maybe I chose the wrong career. Maybe I married the wrong person. Maybe I wasted my best years. Maybe I need to move somewhere else. Maybe if I made more money, I'd feel alive again. Sometimes major changes really are necessary, but sometimes the urge to change everything comes from trying to escape an internal problem through an external solution. A different job cannot automatically give you an identity. A new car cannot give you meaning. A different city cannot guarantee connection. And another relationship cannot permanently silence questions you have been avoiding about yourself. This is why some men make dramatic changes during midlife and discover that the same dissatisfaction eventually follows them. They changed the scenery, but not the relationship they had with themselves. There is another layer here too. By 40, you have accumulated evidence that life does not always go according to plan. Maybe the career was not what you imagined. Maybe a relationship ended. Maybe fatherhood changed you in unexpected ways. Maybe you never became a father at all. Maybe you sacrificed something important because at the time, you believed you had to. And now the mind begins reviewing old decisions. This is where regret can become seductive. Because regret creates the illusion that the present would be easy if only you'd made one different choice years ago. But you are comparing reality with an imaginary life, one that never had to experience setbacks, compromises, ordinary disappointments, or consequences of its own. The alternative path always looks cleaner because you never had to live it. Still, something important is happening beneath those thoughts. You are realizing that the map you used for the first half of adulthood may not be enough for the second. And that does not necessarily mean the map was wrong. It may simply mean you have reached territory it was never designed to navigate. But there's one pattern that can make this transition much harder. And many men unknowingly reinforce it every day. One of the most common responses to feeling lost is to become busier. You work more. Take on another project. Fix something around the house. Spend more time online. Watch another game. Have another drink. Stay distracted until bedtime. Then wake up and repeat the cycle. Not because you are incapable of reflection, but because activity can protect you from uncomfortable emotions. Psychologically, this can function as avoidance. Avoidance does not always mean running away. Sometimes it looks extremely productive. If slowing down brings up disappointment, loneliness, uncertainty, grief, or fear about aging, staying busy becomes emotionally useful. You never have to answer the difficult questions if your schedule keeps asking easier ones. And there is another reason men can remain in this pattern for years. Other people may reward it. Your employer appreciates the extra effort. Your family appreciates your reliability. People admire your discipline. Nobody looks at the man handling 12 responsibilities and says, "I wonder if he is using competence to avoid his own inner life." They simply tell him he's doing a great job, so you keep functioning, until functioning becomes the only way you know how to exist. Then quiet moments start feeling uncomfortable. Vacations feel strangely empty. Weekends become restless. You might even become irritated when there is nothing urgent to do, because without a problem to solve, you are temporarily left with yourself. This is also why some men become emotionally distant without intending to. Imagine your partner asks, "Is something bothering you?" You say, "I'm fine." Not because you are lying. You genuinely may not know what else to say. You can identify the problem with the car, the project, the mortgage payment, or your employee. But describing the vague sadness of realizing 20 years passed faster than expected, that feels harder. And what cannot be expressed often gets converted into something easier to recognize. Irritability, withdrawal, sarcasm, overworking, numbness, restlessness. None of that means a man is defective or emotionally incapable. Often, these habits developed because they were useful. Maybe staying strong helped your family through difficult years. Maybe suppressing your emotions helped you function when you had no support. Maybe being independent protected you from disappointment. Protection is not something to be ashamed of, but a strategy that helped you survive one chapter can become a limitation in another. At some point, strength has to become more than endurance. It has to include the ability to notice what your endurance has been costing you. Ask yourself something simple. When you say you're tired, are you physically tired? Or are you tired of being the version of yourself everyone expects you to be? You don't need an immediate answer. Even noticing the question can be useful. And if this chapter is describing something you've never been able to explain, consider subscribing to A Friend to Heal With. You can also leave a comment with one word that describes this season of your life. You don't have to tell your whole story. Sometimes naming the season is the first way we stop pretending it isn't happening. Because once you stop treating your confusion as a personal failure, another possibility appears. Maybe you do not need to escape your life. Maybe you need to change the way you are living inside it. A life reset after 40 does not have to begin with a resignation letter, a divorce, a motorcycle, or moving across the country. Sometimes the most meaningful reset is much quieter. It begins by becoming honest about what no longer fits. One useful place to start is separating exhaustion from misalignment. Exhaustion says, "I need recovery." Misalignment says something about how I'm living no longer reflects what matters to me. They can feel similar, but they require different responses. If you are exhausted, slowing down may help you see your life more clearly. If you are misaligned, rest alone may not solve the problem. You may need to reconsider where your time, energy, and attention are going. Take one ordinary week, not your ideal week, your real one. Where does your time go? What consistently drains you? What gives you even a small sense of energy or meaning? Which responsibilities genuinely matter to you? And which ones are you carrying primarily because you are afraid of disappointing someone? This is not about abandoning responsibility. It is about examining whether every responsibility deserves permanent ownership of your life. Another important step is rebuilding identity outside of productivity. Many men discover they no longer know what they enjoy because every activity has become attached to performance. If they exercise, they track progress. If they play golf, They track scores. If they learn something, it needs to improve their career. If they have free time, they feel guilty for wasting it. Try doing something that does not improve your resume, increase your income, or impress anyone. Cook because you like cooking. Walk without turning it into a fitness goal. Learn an instrument badly. Build something. Read about a subject that has absolutely nothing to do with your profession. Call someone without having a reason. The point is not the activity itself. The point is to remember that you are allowed to experience life without converting every experience into achievement. Then look at connection. Male friendships often become thinner during middle adulthood. Work gets demanding. Families require attention. People move. Schedules conflict. Years pass. And friendships that once happened naturally now require deliberate effort. A man may have hundreds of contacts in his phone and nobody he feels comfortable calling at 11 at night when life feels heavy. Rebuilding connection rarely happens through waiting. Someone has to initiate. Send the message. Invite the friend for coffee. Tell someone, "I've been a little disconnected lately." You do not need to begin with your deepest emotional history. Vulnerability does not require immediate emotional exposure. It can begin with telling the truth 1 degree more honestly than you normally would. Instead of, "Everything's good," maybe say, "Work's been getting to me lately." Instead of, "I'm just tired," maybe say, "I don't feel much like myself these days." Small honesty creates openings. And perhaps the most important reset is reconsidering the question you are using to evaluate your life. For years, the question may have been, "What should I accomplish next?" Try replacing it occasionally with, "What kind of life feels worth participating in now?" That question can lead somewhere very different. Because your 40s are not simply about preserving what you built in your 30s. They may be about deciding what deserves to come with you into your 50s. And that brings us to the final part of the reset. Understanding that starting over does not require starting from zero. There is a dangerous belief that can appear when a man wants change after 40. "I should have figured this out earlier." But earlier versions of you were making decisions with the information, responsibilities, fears, opportunities, and limitations they had at the time. You cannot build the next chapter by constantly prosecuting the person who built the previous one. You can learn from him. You can disagree with some of his decisions. You can stop repeating his patterns. But you do not have to hate him in order to grow beyond him. A meaningful reset begins with integration. You keep what is useful. You question what is outdated. You grieve what cannot be recovered. And you deliberately build what is still possible. Maybe you spent 20 years developing discipline. Keep it. But use some of that discipline to protect your personal life instead of sacrificing it. Maybe you became excellent at providing for everyone else. Keep that generosity. But include yourself among the people worth caring for. Maybe you learned to survive without asking for help. Respect what that independence did for you. Then ask whether it still needs to control every relationship you have. Your past does not need to be erased. It needs to be reorganized. And your future does not need to arrive as one grand revelation. Sometimes purpose is rebuilt through smaller commitments, being more present with your children, repairing one neglected friendship, taking your health seriously, creating something, mentoring someone younger, changing how you work, learning how to be alone without becoming isolated, having one conversation you have postponed for years, talking with a qualified mental health professional if the confusion, sadness, emotional numbness, or distress feels persistent or difficult to manage on your own. The reset becomes real when reflection turns into behavior. So do not ask yourself to redesign the next 20 years tonight. Choose something smaller. What is one part of your life you already know needs your attention? Not everything, one thing. And what is one action that would make that part of your life 5% more honest? Maybe it is making the phone call, setting the boundary, opening the conversation, taking the afternoon off, updating the resume, going back to something you once loved, admitting that you need support. Small actions matter because they give your mind new evidence. Evidence that your life is not completely fixed. Evidence that you still have choices. Evidence that being 45, 50, or 55 does not mean the story has already been decided. Before we close, tell me in the comments, what part of your life are you ready to reset? You can answer with one word: career, health, friendship, marriage, purpose, confidence, connection, or something entirely your own. And if you know another man who has been functioning well on the outside while quietly wondering where he went inside his own life, share this video with him. Because sometimes a man does not need someone to give him all the answers. He needs someone to finally ask the right question. And perhaps the most important question is this: if the next 10 years did not have to look exactly like the last 10, what would you want to do differently? Feeling lost after 40 does not necessarily mean you took the wrong path. Sometimes it means the path that brought you here has taken you as far as it can. There comes a point in adult life when following the old map becomes less important than learning to pay attention to the person holding it. You are allowed to reconsider. You are allowed to want different things than you wanted at 30. You are allowed to discover that success without connection feels empty, that responsibility without rest becomes heavy, and that strength without honesty can become loneliness. A reset does not require you to abandon your history. It asks you to become more intentional about what happens next. Maybe you cannot recover every opportunity you missed. Maybe certain doors really have closed. But your life is not made only of closed doors. There are conversations you have not had yet, relationships you can still deepen, interests you have not explored, parts of yourself you have barely met because you were too busy becoming who everyone needed you to be. You do not need to reinvent your entire life tomorrow. Begin with one honest decision, then another, and another. The goal is not to become the man you were 20 years ago. It is to become more fully present in the life you still have in front of you. Take care of yourself, and wherever you are in this chapter of your life, remember, you do not have to figure it all out alone.